Hi, my name is Sarah Alexander, and this is my case study of the good teacher gone bad. The situation that we are examining here is a principal who has been at a building for 4 years, and there is a situation with one of the veteran teachers. This veteran teacher was previously the teacher of the year, so obviously had some wonderful qualities and was a very effective teacher. Currently, over the last year and a half, she has been really struggling with some of her core responsibilities at the school, including getting along with colleagues, communicating with parents, and supporting students. And there have been a number of complaints both at the building level and at the district level. Currently, there is a parent who is very upset, saying that his child, is in need of a different teacher because Mrs. Horton is that ineffective. And there was a parent conference with the parent administrator and the teacher to discuss this, the concerns of the parent. And in that conference, Mrs. Horton was extremely unprofessional. So now we are examining the problem and how we would go from this point. So when we first look through the problem identification, we first need to examine what we know, what we need to know, and then identify the problem. First of all, when thinking of what we do know that this is the administrator's 4th year, and there have not been many changes that this administrator has implemented, and that's intentional. But recently there was a change in the curriculum that Mrs. Horton was not supportive of. And Mrs. Horton was previously a Teacher of the Year, which I find to be very important because that shows that at one time she was very effective as a teacher, and she must have had at least some level of passion in her career. And what we know also is that Mrs. Horton has outside stressors that are going on, but unfortunately the principal is not personally aware of these outside stressors. This has just been heard from colleagues. We also know that this is a small rural district, which is important to note when deciding kind of where to go from here. What we need to know is we need to know more about what stress is occurring in Mrs. Horton's personal and professional life. Right now, all we are aware of is something going on with her husband and possibly taking care of her children on her own. We're not sure if there's any other stressors going on. Maybe there's something in the classroom that the administrator is not aware of. We also are not very aware of the previous strengths that she had and also the previous concerns that have maybe been had with the previous administrator. Another thing that we do know is that Mrs. Horton has been working with the same staff for the last 8 years, so they have, I'm assuming, have made some strong relationships there. We don't have information from the previous administrator, and that information may be helpful. Also, we don't know what support Mrs. Horton would be willing to accept or what she needs. What has she been offered in the past? We also need to know what district resources are available and also the district protocol on the disciplinary actions that could be taking place. And those previous evaluations can be really helpful in kind of seeing where she's been and how she got to where she is now. Ultimately, the problem is Mrs. Horton's outside stressors are seemingly impacting her stress levels and abilities to conduct many aspects of her responsibilities. There are many complaints from parents, including that she's late, that she's lost her patience, that she's yelling. She's really struggling with getting along with those colleagues and adapting to changes and communicating with parents and working well with students. Next, we look at the proposed plan of action now that we are able to identify exactly what the problem is. And first off, we need to immediately, administrator needs to de-escalate the teacher. This conference with the parent occurred right before school in the morning, so I feel like this would not be a good time for her to go stay in the classroom as students are arriving. I would find someone immediately to cover her class, allow her to take a couple of minutes to herself, and then I would want to meet with her individually right away to debrief on the conversation that was just had with parents, to see how she felt that it went, how it went with the father of the concerned student. And then at this time, I also think that just kind of diving in and asking those hard questions about what is going on, and hopefully there is a relationship here where she would feel open to talking about her concerns and what is a stress in her life, both personally and professionally. And if there are hesitations with Mrs. Horton, if she's really struggling with identifying a problem, then I do feel at this time it would be important to bring out some of those complaints and letting her know what has been reported to you, and then also noticing, as the administrator, also noticing what just occurred in the meeting. As far as next steps, I would want to discuss with her, is she able to go back into the classroom today? Does she need to take the rest of the day? Does she need to take an extra day? And this would go into district policy as far as, does she need to take some sort of leave for a while while I do an investigation? I think also, if she is able to go back into the classroom, that there should be ongoing support with an extra adult in the classroom, perhaps an extra para and some sort of aide. I would like to be in the classroom as much as possible, and also just encouraging those extra staff to be made available. And that kind of goes back to being in a small district and in a small school and not knowing exactly what supports could possibly be available. I would also want to meet with the students to discuss their concerns. And I would want to do this with not only the student of the parents that we met with, but also other students, to get possibly some unbiased opinions. I would also include district resources. Do we have a teacher leader or instructional coach available to be a mentor to Mrs. Horton? I would also be visible in the classroom. After establishing these things, I would want to follow up with the parent, and I would like to include this information on what steps have been taken, and ultimately that student that the parents are wanting the child to leave that classroom, ultimately that student would stay in that class, as I wouldn't see this would be a situation where the student should be switching classes. But also, another thing I would hope that the teacher would do, hopefully on her own free will, would be to apologize to the parent and also talk with the parent about their concerns. I think with this situation, one of the major flaws is that there doesn't seem to have been any communication between the administrator and the teacher prior to this situation. It was said in the case study that the teacher and the principal had spoke the day before about this meeting, and it sounded as if the teacher was not completely on board with meeting the parents, but ultimately did agree to meet. And I feel like this may have been a situation where the administrator could have sat down with parents individually without bringing that teacher in, and that possibly may have been more effective. As far as resolving the issues with promoting student success, I want to include students in this problem solving, including meeting with the students individually to discuss their concerns. And if there are students who are really struggling from the kind of things that have been taking place in the classroom, I would want to connect those students to school resources, such as the counselor, maybe social worker, school psychologist, someone in the building that would be a neutral party, that would keep information confidential, that can work with the students individually and can work on strategies and just let them talk about how they've been feeling in the classroom. Next, when we think about kind of how the problem has been solved, while I was coming up with my steps on how I would handle this situation, I was thinking about what is best for students and how can I support Mrs. Horton. And one of the leading impacts on students and student success is that classroom teacher. And that's why supporting Mrs. Horton and wrapping around her, that will ultimately impact positively the success of students. And I also want to show parents that I am listening, which is why I want to go back and speak with those parents. I value student safety and comfort in the classroom. I value the trusting relationships with parents and also supporting the teachers. Well, thinking of this problem, I was feeling disappointed for the students and concerned for them, and also concerned for Mrs. Horton and what I can do to tap back in to those strong assets that she had previously. She must have had a passion. She must have had some very strong skills that led her to be the teacher of the year. How can we get back to that place? And I also was feeling very supportive of the parent concerns, because if that were my child, I would want my administrator to really care about my child. And I was also valuing student safety, learning, the standards of the school. It sounds like it's a great school, and also ultimately supporting the success of students. The unresolved concerns that we still have, the ongoing work with the teacher and the staff, how did this situation get this far? I would want to have an open door policy, allowing teachers to come to me with struggles before these struggles get out of hand. I also, the continual observations and support, not only with Mrs. Horton, but with other staff, and then also addressing those additional parent concerns that we have heard about. This case study is really focusing on Standard 2, which is instructional capacity. An educational leader promotes the academic success and personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity. And through this case study, I have demonstrated the academic success piece by connecting Mrs. Horton with resources such as a mentor, a teacher leader, instructional design coach, also creating and having many observations and measuring student performance. And a way to do this would be to check on current student performance and compare it in the future. And also, if Mrs. Horton does not see a problem, one way to maybe get some student feedback, as long as it's approached in the appropriate way, would be a student survey that could maybe address the feelings of the students. And this could be something where we do it now, and then after working with Mrs. Horton, we do it a little later. We want to build her up. And also just continuing that collaboration with Mrs. Horton really focuses on academic success. As far as student well-being, connecting those students with support, I mentioned the counselor, the social worker, checking in with parents. Parents can be the number one supporter of students and of their child. And also relationship building with all staff. There are people in the staff that can help develop those strategies to cope with those students and to also support all students. And instructional capacity, this was shown through connecting with Mrs. Horton's team. I'm sure there are a couple of teachers for that grade level, I'm assuming, and connecting with them and how can they support her, connecting her to other resources, and then also being available, showing her that I support her, and really observing and giving check-ins. And that completes the case study. Thank you.